Welcome, everyone. I am super delighted to have my friend and colleague, Shelly Brunswick, who is going to be speaking with you today. And I just want you to know that today's keynote is brought to you by BeyondSpace. It's in partnership with the American Center in Moscow. BeyondSpace is a 5-month virtual incubator and exchange program for students and early career professionals who are interested in developing new ideas for the space industry. Over the course of the program, participants work in teams to turn a space related idea into a viable concept, learning from industry experts along the way. And today's keynote is open to the public because we believe great ideas should reach as many people as possible. Whether you're a Beyond Space participant or part of the AMC audience, we are thrilled that you are here. But here's a question for you. What do the International Space Station, your morning weather forecast, and the GPS that guided you here today all have in common? Well, they exist because someone dared to think bigger than the horizon in front of them. And that's exactly the kind of thinking our speaker, Shelly Brunswick, has dedicated her life to. We are especially honored to have with us today a global thought leader, a futurist, and CEO and founder of SB Global Limited. And with more than 3 decades of experience at the intersection of space, policy, and emerging technology, Shelley helps leaders and organizations translate space innovation into real world impact. And her career is remarkable in its range and includes many chapters, which led her to serve as Chief Operating Officer of the Space Foundation. Shelly Brunswick has since built SB Global into a globally respected force for strategic leadership and innovation. She's contributed her expertise to research initiatives for both NASA and the European Space Agency. And get this, has delivered more than 100 keynote speeches in a single year across 6 continents. Her honors are equally impressive. She's been named one of the top 100 women in the future in emerging technology. She's received the Women Tech Network Lifetime Achievement Award. She's been selected as one of the top 100 voices for our planet by the United Nations Environment Program. Shelly Brunswick is recognized for her contributions to sustainability and global challenges. And most recently, she just received the Visionary Leader Award at the Influencer Magazine Awards in 2026. She is the author of What Space Got to Do with It, and it's a body of work that draws on conversations with more than 200 global leaders and introduces this concept of a space mindset rooted in curiosity, resilience, systems thinking, and decisive action. In today's talk, Shelley's going to explore how that space mindset, systems thinking, collaboration, and big picture thinking connects to our everyday lives and opens new ways to contribute. Her goal, as she puts it, is to help leaders turn bold ideas into shared achievements on Earth and beyond. Please, everyone, join me in welcoming Shelly Brunswick.
Well, thank you so much, Janet. It's such an honor to be with you. What an incredible program that you're providing. I think this is amazing. And I'm so honored to be part of this and share some insights and some lessons learned that might help spark the next generation of space leaders and enthusiasts. So thank you so much. Wonderful. Well, what I want to start with is I loved Janet's introduction. And some of you might have been listening and saying, wow, that's so much to accomplish. How did you do that? And what I want to really share is that my journey has 4 chapters. So you don't have to think about everything at once. What are you doing next? Where are you going to be in 40 years? You can just take it one step at a time. The first step was my first job out of high school, getting that job, learning from it, going to school at night, transitioning into the next job that brought me into the space industry. So I've been part of the space industry for 25 years. And then that job allowed me to go work as the chief operating officer at Space Foundation. And then I did that for many years. And then I transitioned to being an entrepreneur, like many of you are thinking of, and starting my own company. So we don't have to think about everything for the next 40 years where you're going to be. We just can take it in those small little chapters at a time. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to give you some insight from my 4 chapters that might help you as you're looking forward to the future and looking for those opportunities and where to focus next. So I would like to thank BeyondSpace for hosting this, and Janet and our contributors. This is an amazing program, and I'm honored to be with you. So I am going to look at, there we go. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at some different themes that we can talk about that relate to those different chapters of my journey. And one of those themes I want to highlight is taking advantage of opportunities. Now, many times opportunities might look like work. They might look like volunteering for things. They might not look like opportunities at the time. But ultimately, as you look down the future, they become a stepping stone, an opportunity to help you get to the next step. So I shared with you right out of high school, I went right to work. I didn't have a college education. And part of it was I didn't have money for college. I really didn't know what I wanted to study and get a degree in when I was 18 years old. So I wanted to experience life a little bit and start that work career. But I was offered through my organization tuition assistance. And what tuition assistance did is it helped pay for me to go to school at night and on the weekends. And so that was an opportunity. Now it was work because going to school at night and on the weekends while you're working is a work-life balance. And glad I did it though, because by doing that, going to school at night, I was able to complete my college education. I figured out during that time frame, because it took longer to get my college degree done by going to school part-time at night, but allowed me to really figure out who I was, what I wanted to get a degree in, why I was passionate about that subject. And then that opened a door to the next chapter of my journey. So I share that with you. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight a few leaders that I interviewed for the book series and this talk so you can get their insights on what does taking advantage of opportunities looks like. So our first person is the former president of Ecuador, President Rosalia Ortega. And she says that we really have to look at our careers as being lifelong learners. We need to always be prepared. We need to never stop learning. And we can really see that in today's age. Now, I'm always learning. I'm taking online programs. I just took a program through the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. So I want to share that as an opportunity. The NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center is open globally to entrepreneurs, and it's a free program, and they have their milestone program. So I just took that program to learn more about their entrepreneurship programs. They have workbooks, they have online talks, they have mentoring programs. So it really gave me an idea of what's out there for entrepreneurs for tools. And I know many of you are learning and thinking about being entrepreneurs. So that might be one of those great resources. So we need to never stop learning because new technology is coming on board. We're seeing a lot with artificial intelligence. We got AI agents and so many other things. So it's really good that we're constantly learning, but that doesn't mean we have to go to college. We can do informal learning, like taking programs with the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center or other programs. I also want to highlight a young space professional, Antonio Stark. Now, he talks about, and it's not just, when we look at those opportunities, it's not just sitting back and waiting for them to come to us, although sometimes they do come. Sometimes people walk in your office or give you a call or send you an email, and it's an opportunity like this program today. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be with you. But he talks about you also have to be proactive and cultivate meaningful connections. So just like today, Janet was very kind to introduce me, and we've cultivated a connection. We first met formally at the European Rover Challenge in Poland. That might be a good opportunity for you to think about the European Rover Challenge. It does a conference, but obviously it's also a rover challenge that you might want to compete in. So we actually met at that Rover Challenge a couple years ago. And over the last few years, we've kept in touch. And because of maintaining that relationship and being proactive, I get to join you together, be with you today. So it's about looking for those opportunities, but also being proactive in looking, doing research. There's another really great group that you can look for. They have a website as well as a LinkedIn profile, and it's called Opportunity for Youth. And every day they're posting opportunities about PhD programs, internships, fellowships, grants, scholarships, entrepreneurial programs. So, again, another one of those opportunities that you might have to sign up for their newsletter and be proactive, but it could give you some really good insight on what are some opportunities out there that you may have not known about. And then the third person I really want to highlight for this section is Dr. Chidima. Now, I know Dr. Chidima, we were both mentors for the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs Space for Women program. And that again could be another one of those great opportunities for you to check out. Now, ANUSA has a lot of wonderful programs. I talked about Space for Women, but they have Space for Youth, Space for Water, Space for Agriculture. So if you're interested in any type of technology, especially as it relates to space, UNUSA may have an opportunity for you to find some collaboration, some partnerships, some projects to collaborate on. So again, opportunities are everywhere. Now, what Chidima shared with me was the opportunity that she was provided when she first started working at the Nigerian Space Agency. She was asked, would you write some articles? Now, she's an engineer by training, and she was new to the space agency, but she looked at this as an opportunity. Now, it was unpaid work, it was writing articles, but it allowed her to do research and to learn things. And now she's become a very accomplished leader at the Nigerian Space Agency, completed her PhD during this time frame. And so again, it all started when she first started at the Nigerian Space Agency. She was willing to lean into those projects, take on the things that maybe other people didn't want to. And that's sometimes what opportunities are. Again, somebody not wanting to take on hard projects, and you raise your hand and say, well, I'll do that. I'll try that. I'll lead that team. I'll do that. So that's what taking advantage of opportunities looks like. Sometimes they look like work. Sometimes they look like going to school at night. Sometimes you got to do a little research. But there are opportunities that we're all being presented with. And we really need to look at what those are and how they fit in to where we want our journey to take us. So we'll close this area out with a quote from Richard Branson, who says, if someone offers you an amazing opportunity, but you're not sure you can do it, say yes, then learn how to do it. So as you know, Richard Branson created a rocket company. He was in airlines. He figured it out. He said, yes, we're going to do it, and did it. So sometimes you just say yes and you figure it out. Now, that next step I call defying gravity, trying anyways, even when the odds are against you. You know, I've tried for some opportunities in my career, and I applied maybe the first time, didn't get accepted. And so when those things happen, I call it first attempt in learning, FAIL, fail. So it's not really failure. It's only failure if you stop. It's learning if you keep going. So a lot of times when I've applied for things and I wasn't selected, what I did is I took a step back and said, what could I do that would improve my odds? Do I need to update letters of recommendation? Do I need to change how I do my application itself? Are there other things to do? Like if it's an essay that's required, could I have written my essay differently? So you can always take a step back from those opportunities that maybe you didn't get the first time and reapply and learn how you could improve each time. So we're going to kind of look at some thought leaders that I interviewed for this topic and share some of their insights. Now, one of them is Dr. Priscilla Nowajewski. Now, she works out at ALMA, which is the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array in Chile. And what she shared with me was, you know, when she was pursuing her first PhD program, so I highlight first, she just realized it wasn't a good fit. It was very hard to do the assignments. It wasn't clicking. She just was like, I just don't feel this is the right path. But if you stop pursuing a PhD program, you have to start all over somewhere else. But she knew this wasn't the right path. It wasn't a failure. It was a repivot. It was a pivot to what do I really like? And what she had been doing while she was pursuing that first PhD program is she was hanging out with some really cool people who are part of the Mars Society Chile. And she was really seeing that she liked this space aspect, these opportunities in space. And so she pivoted from that first degree program, took a step back. Sometimes we got to slow down to go forward, to go faster. And she found a different PhD program. She became a planetary scientist and atmospheric dynamic expert. And at the time she was pursuing this new PhD, there weren't even careers in Chile for her. So her country didn't even have a job for her. That's really passion right there. But she moved forward with this new PhD. She started affiliating and doing things with the Mars Society Chile and other space organizations, completed her PhD. And as I said, she's now working at ALMA. She found a career in that PhD discipline, and she's moving forward and helping Chile develop their space ecosystem. So it's okay to try things, to try school, to join organizations and say, maybe this isn't a right fit for me. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to evaluate what the next steps are. I highlight that. Many of you want to be entrepreneurs or are entrepreneurs. Let me talk about Ben Haldeman. He's also the CEO at LifeShip. And he talks about, failure is a lesson leading us to greater understanding. So it helps us to really understand. Many times when things happen and we're successful, we just keep going. We don't really step back and think about the lessons we've accomplished. We just keep moving forward. It's only when failure happens that we step back and say, what happened? What could I have done different? How could I do this differently and move forward? So failure is actually an opportunity to pause and reevaluate what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it, and then do it different. So it's really important to do that. And it ties in with our third leader for this section, Sejal Buhalia. And she talks about how she applies for many things. When she was young in high school and college, she was already running a company. She'd started a nonprofit. She had patents because she's an engineer. And what she said she would do to help kind of keep track of this, because sometimes you forget, again, when you're doing things and you're successful, you don't stop and pause. So one of the things she did is she would actually, just write down on sticky notes or in a notebook the different things she would apply for. And if she was successful, she could annotate that. And if she wasn't successful, she could annotate what did she learn from that and pivot for the next time. And then at a certain point, she could step back because sometimes we forget all the amazing things we're doing. Just like when Janet was kind enough to read my introduction. Thank you, Janet. That was very kind of you. We forget all the little things that help us get there. But by writing it down and starting a journal of the different things you apply for, maybe to be a speaker at International Astronautical Congress that will take place in Turkey in October, you could submit a proposal to do a 10-minute talk. Maybe you get selected, maybe you don't, and then you figure out what could you do differently. So as you look for applying for schools or writing articles or being on the debate team or leading a project, if you get selected, you can annotate what were the things that allowed me to be successful. And if you don't get selected, you could say, what could I do different to be more successful next time? And that ties in with Jose Hernandez. Now, Jose is a former NASA astronaut, but what makes him really unique is that he applied 12 times to become a NASA astronaut. And 11 times he was turned down. That means it was 12 years. Imagine applying for something consistently for 11 or 12 years and being told no. How many of you would think about giving up? But he had a really good support system. His wife, his family, and his wife said, what do those astronauts that were selected have that you don't have? And allowed him to take a step back. Well, some of them were runners and in really good shape and swimmers. Some of them had their private pilot's license. Some of them had scuba diving certifications. So he started evaluating what the astronauts that were selected to become NASA astronauts had that he didn't have. And then he slowly started to accomplish those things and add those to his resume. So it allowed him to figure out how he could then become competitive. And on the 12th application, he was selected to become an NASA astronaut. Now, he does have a book out, and there's a movie out about his story. So if you're interested in learning more about his perseverance and the things he did, you can check out his book and movie. Now, that third area I really want to talk about is embracing uncharted cosmos, you know, the fear of the unknown. Many times opportunities come along, and because we don't know what they are, we don't want to take those opportunities. And an example is when I was offered the opportunity to come into the space industry, they called it space acquisition or space procurement. Now, at that time, more than 25 years ago, I did not know what that meant. And even today, most people don't know what that means. And so I really tried to look at different opportunities. Maybe that wasn't the best fit for me, space acquisition, which just so you know, it means project management. But at the time, I didn't know, I didn't want to do it. But I'm really grateful that I had some wise advisors who said, you should do this. This is a great opportunity, right? It's that opportunity. So I did it. And because of that, I get to be with you today because that step into space acquisition, whatever that is, opened the door for me to be part of the space industry. And that one step led to all the other steps that led me to where I am today. And I'm so grateful to be part of the space industry because we've seen over the 25 years that I've been in the space industry where it was really government employees, government led, only a few countries to where we are today, where almost every country in the world wants to be part of the space industry. If not to have rockets and astronauts, they want the tech transfer that allows us, as Janet said, to use the GPS on our phones or to take pictures because many of the phones that are out there today are using NASA imaging technology to capture those wonderful selfies. We're using a platform called StreamYard. And StreamYard is a form of telecommunications that came from the Apollo era. So we're going to look at a few of our speakers or individuals I interviewed. Pardon me while I have a little bit of a tickle in my throat. But we have to really think about not being afraid of the unknown. And another CEO I interviewed, Michelle DeValley. Now she's in fintech, which is a really exciting industry right now. And it's one of those new industries. And she talks about how creativity can really flourish when we're not critical of our ideas. We need to create a sanctuary where we can brainstorm, where we can talk about ideas, where we can be curious and think about not the unknown, but the opportunity of what's outside of what we know. Now, one of the people I interviewed, Roger, he's actually a futurist. And he has some great books out there on Disrupt with Impact that talk about how being a futurist, that it's really about uncertainty. A lot of people talk about certainty in the stock market or other things, but in reality, the future is uncertain. That's the inherent trait. And so we have to be open to the thought of change, that change is our only constant. So what I want you to think about is don't be afraid to change. And that ties in with our next lesson, which is beyond the desk, expanding your horizon. Now, a lot of times we're very happy with what we do. We go to school, we go home, we do homework, maybe we play a sport, but we are very set in our dynamics. And sometimes it's hard to get out of that set dynamic. So what I want to share is when I started a new job in Washington, D.C., I was new to the area. I didn't know a lot of people, and I didn't know a lot of opportunities that were going on, but something came up one evening where I could attend this event that was being offered for those space acquisition people. Remember, I was selected to do space acquisition, space procurement. And everybody in my office, I was asking them, are you going to go to this event? Are you going to go to this event? And they all said, no, we're just going to go home. So my option was go to the event alone. And again, I was new to Washington, D.C., so I didn't know if I'd know anybody at the event, or I could go home. Well, I chose to get out from behind my desk, go to this event. I only knew a couple people in the room. Now, these were people in space acquisition, my industry, but I had just moved there from Los Angeles. So again, I didn't know a lot of people from the Washington, D.C. area. But I did. I went to the few people I knew. I said hello and greeted them. But one person was there that I did know. He was standing in the corner talking to somebody else. And that person was my boss's boss, the chief boss. And the reason the chief boss knew me is because his executive assistant, his chief of staff, went on vacation for 2 weeks. And what I had done is, remember those opportunities sometimes look like volunteering and work? I had raised my hand and said, I'll fill in for 2 weeks while his chief of staff is on vacation. Now, filling in as your boss's boss, the chief boss, you only work half days. And what I mean by half days is at least 12 hours a day. You're in the office at least 12 hours a day, maybe even 14 hours, because you're there before the boss comes in. You make sure everything's ready. And then you're there after the boss leaves, making sure anything that came up during the day is taken care of before you go home. So for 2 weeks, it was long days, but I got to know the chief boss. He got to know me. He would actually ask questions like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? And actually took an interest in my career. So when I got up from behind my desk and went to this event that was for space acquisition, and I saw him standing in the corner talking to somebody else, I knew him and he knew me. And so I went over and said hello. And he looked at me and he said, hey, Brunswick, what are you doing? And I said to him, well, I'm looking for that next opportunity. How fortuitous. The person he was talking to had just received a promotion and was leaving his job working for the chief boss on the U.S. Capitol Hill as a legislative liaison. And so the chief boss looked at me, he looked at this other person, he looked at me, and he said, Brunswick, how would you like to be a legislative liaison? Now, I want to pause. He didn't give me the job, but because he knew me, because I had volunteered, I took on that project, being his chief of staff for 2 weeks, worked those long days, he got to know me. He was willing to give me an opportunity to interview for the job. And I did. And I got the job. So because of getting out from behind my desk, even when nobody else wanted to go, and from volunteering for the hard projects, filling in as the chief of staff, it led to a new career opportunity I didn't even know about. I didn't even know about legislative liaison. I didn't know any of those things. But here in the United States, when you do space acquisition or you do projects, people need to explain those programs to members of Congress and their staffers so they understand the programs, or you maybe take them out to see those programs in action. And so that is what I ended up getting to do. And I didn't even know that was a career opportunity. But it all happened because we go back to the first lesson. I volunteered for the hard job, the opportunity, and then I got up from behind my desk. So all these lessons learned that I'm sharing with you today interact with each other. And we're going to cover a few people that talk about getting out from behind your desk and expanding your horizons. So Monique is a industry expert really with cybersecurity and blockchain. So again, blockchain is one of those new technologies, distributed ledger systems. Some people associate it with Bitcoin. Those Bitcoins are on blockchain, but blockchain is separate from Bitcoin. It runs different ways of tracking things. And so she's an expert. And again, she talks about, you need to embrace that discomfort. You need to never stop learning. Now, remember, learning seems to be a theme through all these lessons. Never stop learning, formal or informal. We need to keep learning and looking at what the opportunities out there so that when those opportunities become available, we're ready to take them. And again, highlighting another CEO is Brian Talibi. So he's the founder and CEO of Ahura AI. Again, he's talking about being a leader that's with your team. So sometimes leaders are separate from the team, but he highlights the importance of getting out from behind your desk. When he was doing a startup company and his team is working late days and late nights and weekends, he's right there with them. He's working with them day in and day out, getting that startup company to fruition. So being a leader also means being visible and being with your team and leading from the front so that they can see that you're taking all the same risks, late hours that they're doing. And then I like to highlight Ku Wang. Now, Ku Wang is the co-founder of the Carmen Project, a nonprofit, and right now they are open for applications. So they look for young professionals that are doing global projects for collaboration, and they do usually relate to space and health, space and agriculture, space and education. So they're right now, I believe their application process is open till the end of March. So for those of you in the audience, whether this is the year to apply or you want to check them out and maybe apply in another year, you should check out the Carmen Project. But she's also an investor. She invests in space technology companies. And she really highlights that it's important to take action. So I could have just sat at my desk and thought about going to that event and then went home, but I took action. And so having a vision, having an idea is okay, but the important part is to take action. And sometimes the action's big, sometimes it's small, sometimes maybe you go one way, like our Dr. Nowajewski, Priscilla, you start a PhD and realize it's not right, you back up, but take action, try something. Even if it's wrong, you can pivot and go in another direction. So I like to highlight this picture because, if you want to achieve great things, one, you don't need to ask for permission. Try it anyways. And you can see from this picture, where our comfort zone is that little tiny circle. But where the real magic happens is outside that. The real magic. Brunswick, how would you like to be a legislative liaison? Would have never happened had I not gone to that event. So again, I highlight the magic happens when we get out from behind our desk. We try new things. And Michelangelo said, the greatest danger for most of us is not that we aim too high. It's that we aim too low and we reach it. So aim big, shoot for the stars, aim for the moon, go for it. Even if you don't make it, it's okay. You're going to learn, you're going to pivot, and you're going to try again. Keep reaching. So this brings us to those relationships. I've talked a lot about relationships already in the earlier lessons. I talked about how I got to meet Janet a couple years ago at the European Rover Challenge, and we stayed connected. And that led to me being with you today. And that's happened throughout my career. We need to really look for those meaningful relationships and stay connected. And again, it doesn't mean you maybe call every week or have coffee every week, but we stay connected. I reach out to Janet every so often and have that. And sometimes your organizations or relationships change over time. So when I was a young professional like you, I might have been involved in other organizations. So some really great ones are such as Space Generation Advisory Council for young space professionals. They're both international and have online activities and global conferences, but usually each country also has a chapter. I mentioned the Mars Society already, also global organization. Many of those have local or country chapters and leaders. Another great organization, if you're interested in space, is World Space Week. It always happens in early October. Things are going on almost in every country. There are country leaders. Even if you don't want to do a project or do a talk, you can watch it. And that's also in October. So there's organizations that you can join. And as your career changes, The organizations you're a part of may change too. Obviously, I have graduated out of Space Generation Advisory Council because that's for young space professionals, 35 and under, and I'm just a little bit over that. But there's other organizations. I mentioned I'm a program manager. So I've joined Project Management Institute and I take some of their online training or virtual workshops and other things. So there's organizations you can join as your career pivots and grows and matures for you to find like-minded people. And we're going to talk about a couple of those leaders. So one of them is Andrea. And so Andrea talks about how important networking is, but it's not about collecting every card in the room. So I mentioned when I went to that one event, I knew a couple people in the room, and I went around the room and slowly said hello to the people I knew. Maybe I talked to one or new people, but it wasn't about going around the room and getting business cards from everyone because it's hard to maintain connection with 100 people and 100 business cards because you didn't really make a connection. But can you go to an event? Could you go to a Space Generation Advisory Council online event and you follow up with one person? I really enjoyed what you said at that event, and do that. So one of the events I have coming up now that I'm an author is I joined the Authors Guild. So in another week, we have a evening online get together. And again, it's an opportunity to meet some people. We share the passion of being authors and writers. And maybe you find somebody who helps you in your writing journey or that you're willing to share your manuscripts with or bounce ideas off. So, and again, it's not about what you get. It's also what can you contribute to that relationship to be mutually beneficial. I talk about ARPIT, and ARPIT runs a program called the Global Policy, Diplomacy, and Sustainability Program, GPODS. And he runs a think tank that's located around the world. So I believe India, the UK, and the US, but it's open globally. Could be an opportunity to check it out, the GPODS Fellowship Program. I usually am a mentor for their summer program, so they're a very good institute. But he talks about the importance of how relationships are the bedrock of successful ventures because they open the door to new opportunities. So a lot of times I have young professionals who say, how do I find internships? How do I find scholarships? And so I always say, join these groups because the people who are part of Space Generation Advisory Council, SGAC, many of them have already found those scholarships or those opportunities, and they're willing to share how they found those with you. Another great group is the International Space University, ISU, out of Strasbourg, France. They also have a wonderful alumni group, and that alumni shares opportunities with each other. So a lot of times when you join these groups and you network with the people in the group, you find out about resources, about opportunities. I shared the one with you already about the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center that has online webinars and mentoring and workbooks. So joining these groups, obviously joining our program today, BeyondSpace, gives you that insight. And then I love to highlight Ruvimbo Samanga. So she's a space lawyer, and she learned the value of networks, how important they were to helping her navigate her career and take on the next step. And she was actually a Mandela Washington Fellow, which is one of the highest fellowship programs offered through the US State Department and African young leaders. So it was a big kudo for her, as well as the program that she created through the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program through Zimbabwe. So building those relationships is part of how she found out about the fellowship, how she was able to apply, find a US partner, get the letters of recommendation. So I share with you, there are opportunities out there. And sometimes it may seem like you can't find them, but it just takes one small step. Join one of these groups, go to one of the online networking events, find somebody else, ask questions. How do you get the fellowship? How do you find an internship? What are some space programs going on? How do I get a sponsorship to go to that Congress or that event? So building those relationships can help you open the doors. Now, the other thing I highlight is sometimes we disqualify ourselves from opportunities. So one of the opportunities was when I was getting ready to transition out of my career working on Capitol Hill, which I love, but it was time to move to the next level. And I had shared with all my relations, remember that network, I'm going to transition. I want to look for a new opportunity. One day, somebody sent me a job announcement for the Space Foundation. They were looking for their next chief operating officer. And I'm looking at that and I was like, I don't know if that's for me. And I worked in an office where several of us, like 6 or 7 of us, were in an office together with desks. And I mentioned, I go, chief operating officer at Space Foundation. I'm not sure that's for me. And one of my colleagues, Vanessa, said, never disqualify yourself from something you haven't been offered. How many times do we do that? How many times do we think, I'm not going to apply for that scholarship, I won't get it. I'm not going to apply to be on the debate team, they won't accept me. I'm not going to apply for a grant, why would they give it to me and my company and my idea? We talk ourselves out of trying things. So never disqualify yourself. Try anyways. Go for it. The only thing you'll learn is no. Maybe it's no, but remember our earlier lesson, fail, FAIL, first attempt in learning. So that brings us to Desmond. So sometimes, and I share with you, Desmond grew up in Africa, and in their culture, uh, they were kind of taught not to think outside the norm. And so he grew up in Cameroon, and Cameroon doesn't even have a space agency or program. So here's a young man growing up in a country that doesn't even have a space industry, and he wants to be part of space. And many of his friends and family were trying to discourage him, not because they wanted to hurt him or they didn't think he could be successful, but because they didn't want to see him get hurt. So sometimes we talk ourselves out of it, but sometimes the people who love us, sometimes they try to talk us out of the things that they think might be too big of dreams, impossible dreams, and they don't want to see us get hurt. But Desmond persevered, he pressed on, and he started his own company. He's now here in the United States. He had to start in Cameroon. He then went to Nigeria and worked for the space industry there. He then came to the US. He went to Arizona State University, got another master's degree, and now he is working in the space industry in the US right now, because Cameroon is still in a very nascent startup phase for their space industry. But someday, Desmond's going to be able to go back and help them create their space industry. And again, if he had listened to the people who loved him and didn't want to see him get hurt, he never would have been on this adventure. So sometimes people might tell you something's not for you, not because they don't love you or they don't believe in you. They do. They just don't want to see you get hurt if your dreams don't come true. So remember, every time you try to do something, it may or may not work, but you can continue to learn and grow and develop until you find your pathway to making it work. And that brings me up to Verd. Now, Verd runs a program called Out of the Box, similar to what you may be going through a little bit. She runs a program in partnership not only with Israel, the UAE, the US, Italy, and some other countries, but it's really about helping high school students and even junior high students create space businesses. And so that's why she calls it Out of the Box. Think out of the box. And I also met her through that United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs mentoring program. And she says you have to build confidence so that you have to have confidence in yourself. You have to build it in yourself so that even if somebody says, maybe you can't do this, maybe you shouldn't try, you have the confidence in your abilities to persevere, to try anyways, to not give up. And so it's really important to build your own confidence. And I go back, remember we talked about Seijo, who sometimes writes down all the things she applies for, and she sees the things she gets and the things she didn't and pivots. Because when you write down the things you get that are successful, it helps you build your confidence so that you can persevere for even when the times when it's challenging. The third person I'll highlight is Dr. Vanessa. She's in astromedicine. And I shared, how friends and family can sometimes talk to us and they don't want to see us get hurt, or we have our own voices that tell us maybe we shouldn't try for things. But she also talks about sometimes we hear these outside voices and they don't encourage you to keep going. And sometimes you have to be able to block those outside voices and know that this is the path you want to be on. You want to try anyways, even if the odds are against you. So, what I'm going to do now is I know I've been talking for about 45 minutes. So, I want to pause and see, do we have any questions that anybody wants answered? I obviously can keep talking about lessons learned. Oh, we do have some questions. Wonderful. So, um, I think we can take down the slides and we'll go back. So we have a wonderful question from the audience that says, one step at a time, step by step. We should not be afraid of the unknown. The unknown is what we actually need to explore, to change. Absolutely. We're humanity. We're explorers. That's what we do. That's why we're exploring space. We want to know what's out there. We've sent probes out to explore other planets, other moons of other planets. We're excited to be explorers, we as humanity, but that's all of us. Sometimes it's harder when it's me alone trying to explore. So don't be afraid to try new things, to get outside that comfort zone. Now we have another question that's come in that says, what do you think is the potential for space monetization? Is it worth going there more for an idea or for money? So I'm going to kind of talk about the ideas we're really seeing today. We've been exploring space for more than 60 years. The Apollo program, Sputnik, the International Space Station, all of these things have happened over the last 60 years. And what we've really seen is that there is a lot of government-backed industry support. But I also want to highlight from the Apollo era, what we've seen is for every $1 that was invested in Apollo, it was a $7 return. And in 2014, NASA estimated for every $1 that was being invested, it was a $40 return. So, yes, there's a great opportunity for monetization. We're seeing a lot of companies that are looking to go to the moon for research, but for other things. So, some of the things we're seeing, healthcare. We can do a lot of things in microgravity environment, growing tissue, uh, drug discovery and manufacturing. They're doing cancer research in space, Parkinson's disease. Those are all beneficial to humanity, but they also have a monetization. They also benefit business. And so when we can find a way that also monetizes the space industry, it has a much better chance of survival and growing. So we look at all of those activities. We look at going to the moon. The moon has helium-3, which is another source of energy that could be used not only for Earth, but really for the moon and beyond. Because what we've learned is the hardest part of getting off planet Earth is getting out of our gravity. And Janet has a great description for that. So I'm going to let her tell you what it's like to get off the Earth's gravity. But what's better is if we can get off the Earth, manufacture on the moon or in space, and then from the moon, go on to Mars and other planets, because then we can reuse the things. We can do 3D printing on the moon. We know there's water on the moon. There's energy with water. We can break water into oxygen and helium. We can then create energy for rocket fuel. We can then create breathability. We have water. So that we're really looking at how do we monetize it. There are people who are looking at, mining asteroids and other things, but I really look at what we're doing in low Earth orbit. And what's really successful nowadays is our Earth observation, being able to do weather predicting, agricultural crop management. Is there weather patterns coming in that could be risky to your crops, flooding or droughts? Do your crops have pests? Do you need to treat for pest management? So we can do a lot of things with agriculture. We run a lot of our logistics systems, shipping things around the globe using GPS and space timing. We look at, so we got the Earth observation for all of that, but then we also have telecommunications. And again, I shared with you all of telecommunications. The origin was those early space missions in the 1960s, so we could talk to astronauts and cosmonauts. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to talk to them. And then people commercialize that. So a couple great resources to look at monetization and commercialization is NASA and the European Space Agency both have tech transfer offices where there are thousands of patents that are waiting to be commercialized and brought to market. So yes, the short answer to your question on is it worth going there to monetize? Absolutely. Um, so we're going to pivot down. We have a couple more questions. In my opinion, well, I love my opinion. We'll see how that goes. How the space industry will change with widespread adoption of AI. I think it's wonderful. I think AI brings a lot of opportunity. So a lot of my articles, if you've read any of my recent articles in Forbes Technology Council, I usually write a monthly article for them. As I talk about the convergence of technology. Now, a lot of times in the past, leaders thought about single silos of technology, single verticals. So, space, agriculture, fintech, you know, healthcare. But now what we're seeing is this intersection of technology and multiple technologies. So, yes, we talked about healthcare and space. So, can companies go to space to do pharmaceutical development or cancer research or Parkinson research? Absolutely. So, that's space as well as healthcare, biotech. But now, when you layer in artificial intelligence that can help answer things faster, create faster solutions, do Monte Carlo simulations, absolutely. So, AI will also help to expedite bringing new medication to market. One of the companies I really like to talk about, and there's several, but one in particular is called Lambda Vision, and it's created by Dr. Nicole Wagner. And right now, millions of people around the planet lose their sight as they get older through macular degeneration, and there's no cure. But what Dr. Nicole is doing is by sending her material to the International Space Station and then 3D printing a protein lens replacement that can then be sent back to Earth and then doing trials to see if it can replace humans' lenses and then give them back the quality of sight. Now, and the reason she's doing it, she's not a space person, she's a medical doctor, is because it's really hard to 3D print tissue organs on Earth because of gravity. They get a lot of faults. They get air bubbles, they collapse. But when we can do it in space in that microgravity environment, it works much faster. And then we can also look at the data that we're getting from doing those examples and the testing of those. Here in the US, we do FDA to go through all those drug tests and simulations. The AI can help bring those products to market. So if you or you know somebody who's losing their sight for macular degeneration, not only is Lambda Vision looking to create a solution, there are some other companies as well. And there are companies that are doing this for cancer research, Parkinson's, and other disease. So AI is going to help us bring those products to market sooner to benefit people's lives right now. We have a question. I'd like to know if you believe in the dream and what your opinion is on that. Do you think discipline matters more? Do I believe in the dream? I'm not exactly sure what the dream is, but do I believe in the dream of the space industry and discipline? Absolutely. So I am a very disciplined person. I think it's important to, one of the things I'll share with you is I love to do every year is a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you can do it on yourself. A lot of times people think that's only for companies, but you are the CEO of your own life. So you should be doing a SWOT analysis for yourself. What are your strengths? What are some things you can improve on? What are the opportunities out there? And what are the threats to those opportunities? And then you can determine what should you be doing this year, but also how does that lead into your next 3, 5, 10-year plan? So I do believe in the dream, have a dream, be passionate, but temper that. Passion is the spark that gets you excited, but it's perseverance that helps you weather when you have the setbacks, when you have those first attempts in learning, failures and setbacks. Passion, perseverance, they keep you going. So I believe in the dream, but I also believe you have to have discipline I will tell you every day I get up and I have like six kind of priorities I focus on every day. Am I working on my next book? Am I writing articles that people like you can read? So Forbes Technology Council. I also write for another magazine called Global Trends Magazine. I usually include a monthly article about entrepreneurship. Am I doing public speaking like I am today? So you need to be disciplined. What's your strategy? Because your habits determine your success. Your thoughts determine your habits, and your habits determine what will happen and how you will have the discipline to accomplish your goals. So let's see, we got a couple more questions, and I know we're getting close to end. So we have, after working with hundreds of global leaders, what is one lesson about leadership that most people only learn too late? So the biggest lesson I will share with you that I've learned as I've gotten older is it's important to listen. We have two ears and one mouth, but a lot of times I like to talk more than I listen. And especially when I was younger, at that time I thought I knew it all. What I've learned, and I want to say out loud, Mom, you were right. As I've gotten older, I've realized that all the people who've tried to give me wisdom and insight over the years, they were trying to help me. Sometimes I didn't listen, and I had to learn the hard way. I maybe had to have a setback. I maybe had to try harder than I maybe wouldn't have had somebody else help me with the things that I've learned along the way. And that's part of why I've created this talk series for you, is that hopefully this will help you expedite your journey and help you save time, energy, and accomplish your goals. So I really want to thank you for all of that. I know we're at the end of our time, so I want to thank you for all these amazing questions. And I want to thank the American Center in Moscow for having me. Now, I'll be meeting with the BeyondSpace participants in a closed Zoom session, and I'll see you there. And for all of our audience watching around the world, I'm Shelly Brunswick. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you around the galaxy.